Thanks, Krista. The discovery librarian position at University of Ottawa University of Alberta was created, was probably sort of got funding around 2010, and then I started in September of 2011, basically to try and figure out a way to deal with the University of Alberta's whole discovery situation. When I got there, under the sort of there was not necessarily a policy, but there was an idea or a push towards giving students and researchers as many options as we could at the time. And that led to a bit of confusion on our discovery front. At the time that I got there, we licensed EBSCO Discovery Service and WorldCat Local, still had our traditional Symphony OPAC, and had signed up to implement Primo. And all of those were presented on the library webpage as equally as we could make them. We had a nice little file prepared which would try to explain to students and faculty which one they should use for what purpose, but that really didn't work that well. So I came in primarily with a mandate to implement Primo, but really adding one more discovery service to the mix just wasn't going to solve our problems. Eventually, we decided to sort of make a clean break. We sort of abandoned the implementation of Primo, and we got rid of WorldCat Local and kept EBSCO Discovery Service because, anecdotally, that was what our staff users and staff, students, and faculty liked using the most. But we realized that that wasn't just going to be able to do it for us. So my job kind of morphed into figuring out where we would go next in terms of an overarching discovery strategy. A week or two ago, Dale Askey wrote a blog post that basically really cleared the decks mentally for, I think, a lot of people. Drop something like Blacklight in front of your catalog, let that deal with the catalog, and move on and do something else. Look at how you expose your locally created or locally curated content. How do you make that available? How do you expose that more widely? What I'd like to just sort of briefly talk about today is the sort of idea that we have at U of A to take a middle ground between a heavyweight third-party discovery tool that we either host or license, and the sort of very lightweight idea of dropping something like Viewfind or Blacklight in front of the catalog and forgetting about it. So basically, probably like most institutions, we have a whole bunch of data silos all throughout the library, some of which are well curated and well structured. The library catalog, the digitized material that we've got. And then some things, little databases that have grown up for small projects or particular purposes. We have one that business librarians, for instance, have been adding to over the years and managing. That's not in any particular format. They just kind of built a PHP and MySQL website, threw things in there, and that works for them. But we'd like to be able to gather all that material up together and expose it in a single system without necessarily having to fight against really heavy third-party software to do it. So what I've looked at is basically taking Blacklight and in addition to the sort of basic functionality of Blacklight, which is binary mark records, adding in mark XML records, adding in mods records from our digital collections, and sort of just for the hell of it, our SFX records because we've got them and we might as well put them somewhere. So our digital collections are, I think, entirely now moved over to Fedorah. So basically what I've done is just written a couple of Ruby scripts which would pull in, using OAI-PMH, pull down all the records that we've got, either just the metadata, depending on what it is, or metadata plus related content. And then I wrote just a couple of Ruby wrappers for Solar ingest to be able to directly from within Ruby add records to the index or delete them. The deletion primarily in the test phase is deleting absolutely everything, wiping out the index and starting again. But that was sort of a very lightweight way, a very quick and dirty way for me to get all the records in one place, manipulate them a little bit in Ruby, and throw them into the index. And we also got our EBSCO Discovery Service API set up. And also, just so that I could keep everything in one language and in one system, I wrote a little Ruby gem which would give me access to the EBSCO API. What I'm using, I'll show you in a second how the EBSCO integration looks within Blacklight. This is work that they've done, building Blacklight on top of the EBSCO API. And it's currently using their gem, but their gem was really just a kind of proof of concept kind of thing, a very quick and dirty thing. So at some point, I'll sub my gem in for theirs. And then basically what all these Ruby scripts do is pull records from different places, mash them all together, and then create a kind of generic Solar record that I can throw into Blacklight. This is a kind of example of a very, very basic record. I didn't even really think about it, and it's primarily based on SFX eJournal records, this one. But as you can see, it just creates an XML representation of the format that Solar likes. And then in the parent script, writes that out to a Solar XML file, which can then just be directly ingested using the Ruby wrapper into Solar and then appear magically in Blacklight. So this is your basic unstyled, or uncustomized anyway, Blacklight interface. And I've currently broken out the format of the different record types that I've pulled in just within a facet. One other thing that you can do is break each record type or record source out into a different Ruby controller or Rails controller, which would give you a different way to approach those record types if you wanted to build a scoped interface based on one particular thing. So we have a curriculum collection, for instance, which is being it's actually born digital, which will probably end up throwing into this discovery interface, maybe not in the first phase, but in the second phase. But in addition to having it in the basic library discovery system, we may want to break that out into a targeted interface for Alberta teachers. So if we could do that with just the faceted interface, but it may make sense at some point to break it out into its own controller and then target an interface based directly on that. So books are straight MARC records. Journals are the eJournal records from SFX. I just pulled in a few just to test. And even though there's more metadata being pulled in, it's just being displayed. I'm just displaying the title and the format just to kind of keep track of that kind of thing. As you can see, it was really interesting from Roy's talk about how much of the stuff that we're working on today can be traced back 20 years. I don't remember when, Peter, when your talk about faceted searching over using Solar was that 2005? No, 2007? So since then, basically throwing records into Solar and using the faceted browse has become something that is foundational to some of the newer techniques. I know there's a talk later about doing similar discovery system to this based on Elasticsearch, which clearly seems to be something that we're going to have to look at shortly as Elasticsearch maybe picks up where Solar leaves off. And I just wanted to say with respect to the faceted fields, basically what I did, Solar comes with a basic MARC record schema. There's been talk in the Solar group about making that more flexible for other kinds of records out of the box, with a view potentially to moving towards a more schemaless index. What I did was make anything I tagged as a UA field a dynamic field, and then overrode those if there was a field that I wanted to handle specially. That's obviously not a sustainable thing to manage by hand, but when we scale up and we're ready to do this in production, we'll have to look at, in conjunction with the metadata librarians, we'll have to look at sort of better and more efficient ways of doing that. So this always takes a little while. The EBSCO component to this is broken out into its own controller. That's primarily because I pulled in sort of the work that they had done separately. It's possible to integrate those within a single search. Whether that makes sense or not, I don't know, but we'll see. So the setting up of the EDS and Blacklight integration was really fairly straightforward. They supply a few additional files to the Rails engine that drives Blacklight, which sort of overrides a few things in the controller. And then the way the API returns the EBSCO results, everything can be pulled straight into the Blacklight front end, which is actually, it's not very fast right now, but it does give you everything that's within the EDS front end. So all of the limits that would be sort of default EDS limits, full text, catalog only, available in library collection, that kind of thing, all of the basic facets for your EBSCO content or EDS content, and then all their regular metadata plus the bells and whistles like the book covers. What's nice about this, even if you weren't going to integrate EDS through Blacklight into a discovery system, is that this interface, obviously being Rails and sort of more standardized technologies like Twitter Bootstrap, locally hosted, means that you could more easily customize this EDS front end. Even if you just wanted to use it for EDS, it would be easier to style this, make it a bit more user-friendly than it is sort of going through EBSCO to try and get that going. So that's basically it. That's the starting point. We have a proposal on the table at U of A to sort of move ahead with this, but I wanted to sort of get started with some proof of concept stuff, and then hopefully in a year or two we'll actually make this the default discovery strategy for the university. So that's about it. Thanks.